My name is Rowan Ellis. I'm 34 years old, and on Christmas morning my little sister unwrapped a brand new Mercedes C-Class. Its red bow scraped the ceiling while I tore open a $3.49 ceramic piggy bank stuffed with three limp $1 bills. Dad laughed, called it my starter home fund. Mom clapped like it was adorable. The flash from her phone burned white spots in my eyes as I smiled for the photo, the sound of fake cheer echoing in my chest. What they didn't know was that this would be the last Christmas I ever spent under their roof. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to smile through a family gathering that made you want to scream. If you've ever been the one who kept the peace while everyone else played innocent, this story is for you. Because betrayal feels different when it's wrapped in love. I grew up in a beige two-story house on Hawthorne Street in Portland, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looked trimmed by the same invisible hand. From the sidewalk, we looked like a postcard. Straight Christmas lights, two daughters, one golden retriever, parents who waved at neighbors. Inside, everything was arranged to look perfect. Every smile rehearsed, every emotion on cue. My earliest memory was of Tessa's 5th birthday, a blur of pink streamers and rented clowns that scared the younger kids. She got a Polaroid camera that spit out photos still wet with ink. I stood beside the cake, waiting for my turn to take one picture. Dad chuckled, told me, "Let your sister have her moment." The flash went off. I'm not even sure I was in the frame. A year later, when my own birthday came around, the celebration shrank to fit me. Two friends, a grocery store sheet cake with lopsided frosting, and a plastic topper that looked like it had melted in the oven. Mom said, "It's the thought that counts." But thoughts don't count when you're 6, and watching your mom wrap your sister's next mountain of gifts a week later. I swallowed the hurt, the way kids do when they don't yet have names for betrayal. By middle school, the favoritism became ritual. My report cards lined with A's got a polite nod. Tessa's C's earned lectures about creative brains working differently. Dad called her art projects expression. My math trophies were expected. Mom praised me only with a "but." "You're so responsible, Rowan, but don't make your sister feel bad." I learned that love in our house came with a condition: make yourself smaller so someone else can shine. Every evening had its rhythm. The clink of Dad's whiskey glass after work, the scent of lemon polish, the hum of Mom's voice on the phone, bragging about our artistic one. Tessa's laughter echoing down the hall as she called me Miss Spreadsheet. Sometimes, after bedtime, I'd sit on the stairs, knees to my chest, listening to my parents talk. One night, I heard Dad sigh. "Rowan will be fine no matter what. It's Tessa I worry about." Mom agreed softly. "Exactly. She needs more support." That's when I realized strength was a punishment. Being dependable meant being invisible. By high school, I carried rules like armor. Curfews, check-ins, expectations. Tessa floated above them all, trusted because she was impulsive. When I asked why I couldn't have the same freedom, Dad said, "You're different. You don't make stupid choices." He meant, I don't have to care if you fall. Graduation night. I stood at the podium as valedictorian. My speech about persistence drew a standing ovation. When I turned toward the audience, the family seats were empty. Later, Mom explained they'd driven 2 hours away for Tessa's soccer tournament. We didn't want her to feel left out. That was the night pride turned into something sharper: anger that hummed quietly beneath my ribs. But anger wasn't allowed in the Ellis house. So, I smiled, pretended it was fine. College became my escape route disguised as debt. I earned scholarships but still took out loans, $72,000 worth of proof that independence has a price tag. I worked nights at the bookstore, weekends in the cafeteria. Meanwhile, Tessa announced she was finding herself on a self-funded art tour through Europe. Mom called it cultural exposure. I called it my tuition money with better scenery. One winter, I phoned home from a dorm payphone, exhausted. "Just checking in," I said, hoping for warmth. Mom replied, "You sound tired, sweetheart. Don't overdo it. You don't have to prove anything." But in our family, love wasn't given, it was earned through usefulness. When Grandma Hattie passed away my senior year, her inheritance was supposed to help me start life debt-free. Instead, Dad said, we used it for something important: a business investment for Tessa's design studio. He called it family money. I called it theft. That night, I sat in my dorm room, staring at the letter Grandma had written before she died. Her handwriting shaky but clear, You don't owe anyone to be loved. I folded it into my first blueprint tube. It's still there. After graduation, my first job was as a junior structural engineer in Seattle. I mailed home gifts, a leather briefcase for Dad, a silver bracelet for Mom, a printer for Tessa's studio. The group text reply was 2 emojis, no words. Holidays became minefields disguised as reunions. Thanksgiving dinners where Dad grilled me about deadlines, but bragged about Tessa's clients. Mom poured wine and played mediator, pretending not to notice how I finished my plate faster just to leave the table. The worst part wasn't the favoritism. It was how reasonable they made it sound. Tessa's field is harder. She needs more help networking. You're the stable one. Stable, capable, independent. Their polite way of saying, you don't need love. By 25, I started saving for my own car. Used, dented, reliable like me. That Christmas, I drove 7 hours through snow to surprise them. Tessa flaunted her new designer handbag. Dad handed her keys to a new apartment for her business. When I mentioned my promotion, he said, "That's great, but don't burn out chasing titles. You should learn from your sister. She knows how to enjoy life." That was the first time I realized my success wasn't invisible. It was inconvenient. That night, lying awake in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the wallpaper, tiny faded flowers, still marked where Tessa's posters used to hang. Downstairs, laughter, clinking glasses. I thought about leaving then, but leaving meant admitting they'd never change. I didn't know it then, but every dismissal, every "you're fine, Rowan," was a crack forming in the structure I called home. And someday, that house of fairness by favoritism would collapse. By the time I hit 30, the cracks in that old house weren't just emotional, they were measurable. I could feel them in the air whenever I walked through the front door, like the pressure changed just enough to remind me that peace wasn't free. I was living in Seattle then, working long hours at a firm that cared about numbers more than narratives. I liked that. Numbers don't lie. People do. Every equation had an answer, every structure a purpose. The more predictable my blueprints became, the less chaotic my family felt in comparison. Still, every holiday season, I'd find myself on that same drive south, 7 hours through icy mountain passes, windshield wipers squeaking like an old metronome. I told coworkers I went because family's family. Truth was, I went to prove I was still worth showing up for. Christmas at the Ellis house smelled like pine, candle wax, and guilt. Mom greeted me with that careful warmth she saved for guests. "You look tired, honey. Working too hard again?" She'd glance at Tessa and add, "You should take a page from your sister's book. Balance is everything." Balance. In our family, balance meant I carried both ends of the scale. One Thanksgiving, I arrived early with groceries, thinking I'd help cook. The counters were already lined with catering boxes labeled Tessa's menu. She breezed in wearing heeled boots and perfume that smelled like citrus and ego. I told Mom I'd handle dinner this year. "Presentation matters," she said, flashing me a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Dad looked up from his phone and nodded. "See? She's taking initiative. Finally found her niche." I stood there holding a bag of potatoes, wondering how I'd become a background extra in my own family. After dinner, while everyone raved about food she hadn't even cooked, I washed dishes alone. From the dining room, I heard Mom say, "Rowan never complains." Bless her heart. She was right. I didn't. Because complaining implied hope that something might change. The breaking point didn't come in one dramatic explosion. It built quietly, like tension in a steel beam. No one bothers to inspect until it gives way. The first warning sign came the year I bought my condo, a one-bedroom with cracked hardwood floors and a view of the Sound. I called Dad to share the news. He congratulated me, then added, "I hope you didn't overextend yourself. It's better to stand on your own 2 feet." 3 months later, he co-signed the lease for Tessa's downtown studio. When I found out, I didn't yell. I just felt something tilt inside me, like realizing a bridge I'd trusted my whole life had been built on bad math. Then came the letter about Grandma's will, the inheritance I was supposed to receive. The part Dad claimed went to family investments. I believed him until I saw a local business article about Tessa Ellis' creative studio, funded by a generous private backer. That backer was my grandmother's legacy. The proof was in the fine print of the studio's registration. I read it twice, then a third time, until the words blurred into betrayal. That night, I sat on my couch, staring at my student loan statement, the one that still followed me like a shadow. I pulled out Grandma's old letter again, the one about love not being dead. Her pen had wobbled on that line. I ran my thumb over the ink until it smudged. That was when I started keeping evidence. Not because I planned revenge at least. Not yet, but because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy. That all those small favors and harmless paperwork had a pattern. So I made a folder on my laptop called Blueprints. Inside, I stored screenshots of messages, bank transfers, and emails that didn't sit right. Every time Mom used the word family, I learned to check my credit score. A few months later, I drove home again, this time for what they called a relaxing family weekend. Tessa had just broken up with another boyfriend, and Mom wanted me there for emotional support. When I arrived, Tessa was lounging in the living room, sipping wine like heartbreak was a brand deal. "Glad you could make it," she said, barely looking up from her phone. Dad handed her a white envelope, something about business expenses. When I asked what it was, he said, "Just helping her reset. She's had a rough year." I looked at the embossed name on the envelope. It was from the same bank as my student loans. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the refrigerator hum and their muffled laughter downstairs. Around midnight, I opened my laptop, pulled up the Blueprints folder, and started typing notes. Timeline of inequity. Financial discrepancies. Emotional manipulation masked as concern. It sounds clinical, but documenting pain was the only way I knew how to survive it. A week later, a letter arrived at my condo, an overdue notice for electricity at the family cabin in Oregon. Except I hadn't been there in years. I called the utility company. They said my name was listed as guarantor. My credit, my liability. When I confronted Mom, she sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Oh, sweetheart, it's just paperwork. You're so organized. I knew you'd keep it sorted." "That's fraud," I said flatly. Her voice turned sharp. "Everything is black and white with you. No wonder you're alone." The call ended with static, but I still heard the echo of that last word. Alone. That's how they justified everything. They called my independence loneliness, my boundaries selfishness. And for a long time, I believed them. But even steel has a fatigue point. The real collapse came on Christmas morning, 7 months later. The house smelled the same pine, sugar, and performative joy. The same music, the same photo poses. Only this time, I didn't bother pretending. I just watched. Tessa unwrapped her gift first. A Mercedes C-Class, keys dangling from a ribbon the size of a toddler. Dad's voice boomed with pride. Mom wiped a tear. Then came my turn. A small box, light in my hands. Inside, a ceramic piggy bank shaped like an owl. Price tag still on. Inside it, 3 crumpled $1 bills. Dad laughed. "For your future house fund?" Mom clapped. "It's the thought that counts." The smell of pine and champagne blurred together as my stomach twisted. The camera flash went off again. My smile barely moved. Tessa leaned over, her tone syrupy sweet. "Don't worry, sis. I'll give you a ride when your old car dies." That was it. The moment everything inside me stopped absorbing impact. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3:42 a.m., I packed a single duffel bag laptop, blueprint tube, Grandma's letter, and that cheap ceramic owl. I placed my house key on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker. The refrigerator hummed, steady and low. I whispered, "This isn't home anymore." Outside, snow fell heavy and soundless. The driveway glistened under the porch light. I started the Toyota, the same one Dad threatened to report stolen. The tires crunched over ice as I pulled away from the curb. Bing Crosby sang about white Christmases on the radio. I turned it down until his voice disappeared. As the leaving Portland sign flashed by, my phone buzzed, Mom, then Dad, then Tessa. I didn't answer. The only message that came through read, "Did you remember to pay the cabin's electric bill?" I almost laughed. Hours later, I stopped at a diner off I-5. The neon sign flickered between open and pin. Inside, the waitress Bernice poured me coffee without asking. "Rough night?" she said. "Rough life," I answered. She smiled, soft lines around her eyes. "Honey, blood makes you related. Respect makes you family." Her words hit harder than any insult ever had. I wrote them on a napkin before I left. By sunrise, I was at the California border, hands shaking from caffeine and exhaustion. I texted Jordan, "Still alive. Heading your way." She replied instantly. Doors open. When the first light spilled over the mountains, something inside me loosened. It wasn't hope yet, just relief. I didn't know it then, but I just crossed the fault line between endurance and freedom. And nothing that came next, therapy, proof, confrontation, revenge, would have been possible without that single night of leaving. San Francisco didn't feel like freedom. At first it felt like recovery. Jordan's apartment smelled like coffee and paint thinner, and the floor creaked every time I turned over on the couch. But the quiet there was different. It wasn't punishment. It was space. I got hired at Whitmore Engineering, a mid-size firm with glass walls and deadlines sharp enough to cut. My first week, Marcus Reed, the project lead, walked past my cubicle and said, "We need engineers who don't panic when things crack." I told him, "I design so they don't." He smiled. It was the first time in years someone saw value in what I did instead of what I owed. For a while, life ran on a steady rhythm. Work, therapy, sleep. Dr. Claire Mindel asked questions no one in my family ever had. "What do you get out of being the strong one?" she asked. I answered without thinking. "Control." She wrote it down like a diagnosis. But peace never lasts when guilt has your phone number. The first voicemail came 2 weeks after I started the job. Dad's voice, clipped and formal. "Rowan, if you still have the Toyota, I'll have to report it stolen. Paperwork's under my name." He wasn't lying, the car loan had both our signatures. But the tone wasn't concern. It was leverage. I called the bank. They said the loan had been closed months earlier, paid off in full from a joint family account. My name was still on record, though, tied to an open insurance policy. I hung up shaking. That's how they did it, turn kindness into chains. Jordan found me pacing the kitchen. "They're still controlling you," she said. "They think they are," I replied. That night, I opened the blueprints folder and started a new subfile, financial manipulation. A week later, an envelope arrived from Oregon utility bill, past due for the family cabin. I hadn't set foot there since high school. I called the company again, and the woman on the line said cheerfully, "Oh yes, you're listed as guarantor." "How long?" I asked. "Since 2018. My throat went dry. That was the year Tessa opened her studio. I emailed screenshots to Jordan. She whistled through her teeth. "They forged something. You should freeze your credit." I did. Then I filed a fraud alert. The bank confirmed the e-signature came from an IP address in Portland. Timestamped the same day my parents posted a family brunch photo online. I stared at that photo for a long time. Mom in her pearl earrings. Dad mid-laugh. Tessa raising a mimosa. Caption: "Grateful for family that sticks together." The next day, Tessa posted another picture, black and white. Hand on heart, eyes shining. Caption: "Praying for those struggling with mental health in my family. Love heals." Comments poured in. Heart emojis. "You're such an inspiration. Family first." She never mentioned my name, but everyone knew. I texted her. "Take it down." She replied, "It's not about you. Don't make everything about yourself." I threw my phone onto the couch and laughed, one sharp, humorless sound. She just turned my silence into content. I told Jordan. At work, Marcus noticed. "Everything okay?" he asked one afternoon while I was recalculating load ratios. "Family drama," I said. He nodded. "Then build something solid enough they can't shake it." I took that literally. The Whitmore Tower project, an eco-friendly high-rise by the bay, became my obsession. Each steel joint felt like defiance, proof that something in my life could hold weight. But the family didn't stop. First came the group email, subject, reunion. Aunt Marlene wrote, "Your mother's blood pressure is high. We all make mistakes. Don't let pride destroy family." Attached was a photo of Mom looking pale and delicate, hand on her chest like a martyr. 2 days later, Uncle Victor called. "You sound angry," he said. Like that was worse than being betrayed. "I'm done sounding agreeable," I answered and hung up. Every time I blocked a number, another message found me, through cousins, old neighbors, even one of Mom's church friends. The phrasing was always the same: family sticks together. I kept saving them, tagging each message by date and sender. Evidence wasn't just insurance, it was oxygen. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from the bank. The clerk said politely, "We're reviewing your guarantor status on a second mortgage under Greg and Linda Ellis." My pulse thudded in my ears. "Excuse me?" "Yes, We just need your signature to finalize renewal since you're already a co-signer. I froze. I never signed that. Well, we have a digital copy, she said. Dated last month. I asked for the metadata. The IP address again traced to Portland. That was the moment I stopped feeling scared and started feeling focused. I called Olivia Kent, the building manager who'd notarized my San Francisco lease. She verified that all my documents from that date were local. Then she said quietly, "If they forged your signature, you can subpoena the logs." It was the first time someone used the word forged out loud. It felt both terrifying and liberating. That night, I sat at Jordan's kitchen table, the city humming outside. We labeled files together: vehicle leverage, cabin utilities, mortgage fraud, emotional manipulation. She wrote the last one in red marker and underlined it twice. "This is more than revenge," she said. "You're building a case." "I'm building a record," I corrected. "For once, the structure will be mine." The next morning, I walked into work early, coffee still burning my tongue, and stared at the blueprints pinned on the wall lines. Angles, tension points, every piece carrying weight but never breaking. If only families came with schematics, I thought. But they don't. They come with silence. And silence can be forged too. The next time I heard from them, it wasn't through a phone call or email, it was through a certified letter, thick envelope. My parents' return address typed neatly at the top. Inside was a single sheet, notice of family property adjustment. Legal jargon disguised as reconciliation. The letter said I was temporarily responsible for utilities and taxes on the family cabin to avoid service interruption while the family transitions ownership. At the bottom was a scrawled signature that was supposed to be mine. It wasn't even close. I took it straight to Dr. Mendel after work. She looked over her glasses and said, "You know what this is?" "Fraud," I said. "Also a test," she replied. "They want to know how far they can push before you break." I didn't break. I documented. That weekend, I drove to the bank branch in downtown San Francisco and asked for a printout of every account my name was tied to. The teller hesitated. Then she handed me a stack of papers nearly an inch thick. 3 accounts. 2 I recognized. 1 I didn't. The third account had been opened 6 years ago, under an address in Portland. Monthly payments from that account had gone directly to Tessa Ellis Creative Studio. And the cardholder? Rowan G. Ellis. I stared at it until the letters blurred. They hadn't just used my name, they'd built a shadow version of me to fund her dreams. I called Jordan from the parking lot. My voice shook. "They opened a credit line under my social security number." "Then we trace it," she said. That night we combed through old emails, comparing dates, transfers, billing addresses. Every transaction was a breadcrumb leading back to the same pattern. My stability paying for their chaos. Marcus noticed my exhaustion the next day. "You look like you haven't slept," he said, setting a coffee on my desk. "I'm fine," I lied. He studied me for a moment. "You know the difference between stress and pressure?" "Not really. Pressure builds something. Stress breaks it. Make sure you know which one you're under." That line stuck with me. Because while I was quietly compiling evidence, Tessa was building her own narrative. Her posts became increasingly therapeutic. Long captions about forgiveness, empathy, and those who refuse to heal. The photos were always soft focus, her head tilted just right, her followers gushing about bravery. Then came the sponsored video. Family doesn't always understand your journey, but love always wins. A close-up of her hand holding Mom's. I watched it on mute, bile rising in my throat. In the corner of the frame, you could see my old blueprint tube propped behind the couch. She'd used it as a prop. I almost threw my phone. Instead, I saved the video file into my blueprints folder. When the next call came from Dad, his tone was sharp, almost businesslike. "You've made your point," he said. "Now it's time to come home." "This isn't a standoff," I answered. "Then stop acting like a victim. Your mother's sick with worry. She's always sick with something when she wants control." A pause. Then the shift from command to contempt. "You think you're better than us now? That job, that apartment, it's nothing without family." I said quietly, "I built all of it without you." He hung up. 2 weeks later, Tessa posted photos from what she called a healing family brunch. She tagged everyone except me. The caption read, "Learning to forgive even when people don't apologize." Comments poured in. "So mature. You're the bigger person." I scrolled until I couldn't anymore. my chest tight with something that wasn't anger, it was fatigue. Because even when I left, they found a way to drag me into the story as the villain. Then, another blow. A letter from the county assessor's office saying the Ellis home insurance renewal listed me as secondary guarantor. My signature again, copied, flattened, slightly slanted. I stared at it under the fluorescent kitchen light until I started laughing. A dry, bitter laugh that tasted like disbelief. Jordan grabbed the letter, jaw tightening. They're not just crossing lines, they're building a house on your name. Then it's time to demolish it, I said. For the next week, we worked like detectives. Jordan handled the tech side, IP traces, metadata. I cross-referenced every timestamp with family photos, brunch check-ins, and Instagram posts. The arrogance made it easy. They documented their own crimes in real time. I sent a formal request to the bank for IP confirmation on all e-sign documents. When the report came back, the address matched my parents' home network. Timestamp: the exact hour they uploaded a Christmas photo with the caption, "Family means forever." I printed everything, slid it into a folder labeled Blueprints, Evidence B, and sealed it with tape. That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the bay. The wind was cold, the kind that cuts through your coat and finds the cracks beneath your ribs. My phone buzzed a notification from Tessa's newest post. This one was a black and white photo of us as kids. She's front and center, frosting on her face. I'm blurry in the background. Caption: "No matter what, sisters are forever." Thousands of likes. Hundreds of comments. I didn't comment. I didn't block her. I just took a screenshot and added it to the folder. Because I'd stopped reacting. I was preparing. I didn't know it yet. But the next time we saw each other at Piper's wedding, every one of those receipts would finally matter. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't sound like shouting. It would sound like the quiet click of a lock finally opening. The Magnolia Gardens estate in Portland looked like something out of a movie. White columns, chandeliers, the air thick with perfume and money. Violin notes floated through the hall, rehearsing for the wedding that hadn't started yet. I stood at the entrance, gripping the strap of my bag, feeling the weight of 7 months settle on my shoulders. It was the first time I'd seen my family since the night I left. The first time I'd set foot in Oregon since crossing that state line under snow and silence. I spotted them before they saw me. Mom, flawless as always. Emerald dress hugging her figure, smile rehearsed. Dad, straight-backed in his tailored suit, the same confidence he'd weaponized my whole life. And Tessa, cream silk dress, hair in soft curls. A camera crew hovering nearby like disciples. For a second, my pulse faltered. Then I remembered the forged documents, the bills, the posts. I remembered every quiet dismissal. And I walked in. Mom's hand flew to her chest. "Rowan," she whispered. "You came." "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't miss the show." She blinked, uncertain whether I meant the wedding or what was about to happen. Inside, the ballroom gleamed under fairy lights. Every table was labeled with calligraphed name cards carefully arranged so that my family could sit in perfect symmetry. Except that symmetry was already broken. I'd spoken to the event coordinator, Kara Dawson, days earlier. One discrete change in the seating chart meant their empty chair would sit exactly where mine should have been. A missing piece in their perfect picture. But that wasn't the main event. That was just the prelude. The library waited at the end of the corridor. A room lined with leather-bound books. Firelight flickering beneath portraits of ancestors who probably looked the other way just like my parents had. That's where they asked to talk privately before the ceremony. When I entered, the air was already heavy with tension and cologne. Mom sat in an armchair, tissue in hand, the picture of frailty. Dad paced near the fireplace, glass half empty. Tessa stood by the window, scrolling her phone, pretending boredom but radiating nerves. Dad gestured to a chair. "Let's make this quick." "I'll stand," I said. Mom dabbed at her eyes. "We're here because we love you." I raised an eyebrow. Funny way of showing it. Tessa snapped. "You've made everyone miserable, Rowan." Dad lost his job. Mom's in therapy. We're selling the house. Because of me? I interrupted. She folded her arms. You walking out started all of it. I took a slow breath, opened my bag, and pulled out a leather folder. Funny. I thought it started here. Dad frowned. What's that supposed to be? I set the folder on the table and opened it. 2 columns of photographs side by side. Tessa's 5th birthday party, a pink castle cake taller than her. Mine, a melted grocery sheet cake with my name half missing. Tessa's art ribbon on the fridge for years. My science trophy boxed and forgotten. Tessa's college fund receipt. My student loan statement. Finally, last Christmas. Her with the Mercedes bow brushing the ceiling, me holding the $3 I'll bake. This is ridiculous, Dad muttered. Mom's voice wavered. Rowan, these are just old memories. Why dig them up? Because patterns matter, I said quietly. Ask any engineer. Then I laid down the second folder blueprints. Here's something newer. I flipped it open. Utility statements for the cabin. Forged guarantor's signature. Mortgage renewal listing me as co-signer. IP logs from your home Wi-Fi. And this, I slid across the printed report, a bank account opened 6 years ago under my social security number, funding Tessa Ellis Creative Studio. Mom went pale. Where did you? Public records, I cut in. You were sloppy. Dad slammed his glass down. You're out of line. No, I said. You are. When you used my credit, my identity, and my silence to keep your image clean. Tessa's voice cracked. You're spying on us? I'm documenting abuse. She laughed. Brittle. This is insane. Maybe, I said, but it's provable. I reached into my bag one more time and pulled out a small object, the owl piggy bank. Its paint was chipped at the edges now. I set it in the center of the table. Then, slowly, I twisted the plug open. One by one, $2 bills spilled out crisp, deliberate, 34 in total. The sound of paper against wood echoed in the silence. I've saved one for every week since I left, I said. 34 weeks. 34 reminders of what freedom costs and what it's worth. No one spoke. The fire crackled. Even Tessa's phone was still. Then I added one last piece. A yellowed envelope with Grandma Hattie's handwriting. Remember this? I asked softly. The letter you said was just sentimental? Inside, a smaller sealed note. I slid it toward Dad. It's a codicil. Grandma's legal addendum. She left a separate account for me. The lawyer sent it years ago, but someone signed for it at your address and never forwarded it. Dad's face drained of color. That's a lie. I placed a printout beside it. A postal receipt signature dated and archived. His signature. Tessa whispered. Dad. He didn't look at her. His eyes were on the paper, on the evidence that turned every excuse to ash. Mom's voice broke first. We never meant. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said. The clock on the wall chimed 3:30. In the distance, the music swelled. The ceremony was about to start. I gathered my folders and the empty piggy bank. The table was still covered with bills, photos, and evidence like a crime scene of love turned transactional. Dad's jaw clenched. You think humiliating us makes you right? I looked at him, calm. No, it makes me free. He stepped forward, eyes glassy with something between anger and regret. Family sticks together. I met his gaze. Only if the structure can hold weight. Then I turned toward the door. Behind me, Mom whispered, what if we can't fix it? I paused, hand on the handle. Then this is the last time you'll ever see me. The fire hissed behind me as I walked out, my heels clicking against the marble like a metronome counting down the end of an era. Outside the library, laughter floated through the hallway, guests unaware of the demolition that had just occurred upstairs. As I passed a tall mirror, I caught my reflection. Eyes steady, shoulders straight, no longer shrinking to fit their frame. For the first time, I looked like the person I'd been designing all along, someone built to stand on her own. And in that moment, surrounded by chandeliers and violins, I realized revenge didn't always explode. Sometimes, it just quietly, beautifully collapsed the old structure so a new one could rise. That night, Portland was drowned in mist. I sat alone in my hotel room at the Hilton, the same one I'd booked under my own credit card, my name, my rules. The city outside glowed through rain-streaked glass, a blur of orange and white. I should have felt hollow after what happened at the estate. Instead, I felt steady, like the world had finally stopped shaking. The blueprints folder lay open on the nightstand, documents neatly stacked beside the cracked owl bank. Every paper, every screenshot, every receipt that once felt like a wound was now part of my design. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't begged. I just laid out the evidence and walked away. It was the cleanest demolition I'd ever engineered. At 11:07 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Tessa. You didn't have to humiliate them like that. They're broken. Happy now? I stared at the words, thumb hovering. Then I typed back. Truth doesn't break people. It shows what was already cracked. I hit send. No follow-up came. A week later, I was back in San Francisco. Marcus called me into his office. Your report on the Whitmore Tower was flawless, he said. I'm promoting you senior project manager. It should have been a triumph. Instead, it felt like closure. Proof that my worth could exist without validation. Jordan popped champagne in my kitchen that night. The cork hit the ceiling, fizz spilling across the counter. You did it, she said. I laughed soft, tired, real. I didn't do anything, I said. I just stopped pretending. Dr. Mindell asked in our next session, do you want reconciliation? I want honesty, I answered. If that ever comes with it, fine. But I'm not waiting for them to rebuild me. Still, life has a way of sending echoes when you least expect them. A month later, an email from Mom arrived. No dramatics, no guilt. Just, we've started therapy. Your father's attending AA. We're paying off everything under your name. Proof attached. And there it was, the scanned release forms, notarized, removing me from every tie that once chained me. I didn't cry. I just closed the laptop and looked at the sunset bleeding across the bay. On the shelf beside me sat the owl bank, now filled not with money but with folded paper notes. Each one a lesson. The last read. Freedom isn't walking away, it's knowing you could, and choosing not to need to. They thought I'd destroyed the family, but I was only rebuilding the foundation one truth at a time. And deep down, I knew this wasn't revenge. It was structural integrity. If you've ever been the one holding your family together while they pulled you apart, this story is for you. If you've ever had to earn love that should have been free, or watched someone rewrite your truth to make themselves look kind, you already know what strength really costs. Hit like if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ruins they left behind. Subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own home, because this story isn't over. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't shouting. It's living better, freer, louder than they ever expected.